There comes a moment in every life when the mirror cracks, not the one made of glass, but the one we carry inside. You wake up one morning and realize that the person staring back at you no longer feels like you. The smile looks practiced, the words sound rehearsed, and the life you've built feels like it belongs to someone else. You've been running for years, chasing success, approval, belonging, only to find yourself standing in the ruins of your own exhaustion. That's when it happens, the collapse, the moment when everything familiar begins to fade and you can no longer pretend that you are whole. It feels like loss, but it is not. It is the beginning of truth. Because sometimes the universe has to break you to show you what was unbreakable all along. Rebuilding yourself is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. It's about descending into the silence within, facing your own shadow, transforming pain into wisdom, and allowing the real self, the one that has always been waiting, to finally emerge. This is not the end of your story. It's the point where your real story begins. The collapse of the old self is not a tragedy. It is an awakening disguised as ruin. Every person reaches a point where the life they have been living begins to crumble, where the stories they have told themselves no longer make sense, and the image they built begins to fracture under the weight of truth. It feels like chaos, but in reality, it is the call of transformation. You have spent years constructing an identity from expectations, opinions, fears, and borrowed dreams. Yet, beneath that construction lies a silent truth. You are not who you have been pretending to be. The world, in its strange wisdom, begins to strip away everything that is false. Relationships fade, careers collapse, beliefs lose meaning, and suddenly you are left naked before your own soul. This is the collapse of the old self, and it arrives not as an act of cruelty, but as a necessity for rebirth. When the structures of life fall apart, your first instinct is resistance. You want to hold on to what is familiar, even when it suffocates you. You cling to comfort because it gives you the illusion of stability, but the very pain you try to escape from is the force trying to free you. The disintegration of the old self is a sacred process. It dismantles every illusion that has kept you small. It shatters the roles you were told to play. It exposes the emptiness beneath ambition and the loneliness behind pride. You start to see that much of what you called yourself was built from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of insignificance, fear of facing the unknown. To rebuild yourself, you must first let that structure collapse completely, because only from the ashes can something real emerge. The fall feels personal, but it is universal. Every soul that seeks authenticity must pass through this fire. It is not a punishment, it is purification. You begin to witness the death of your ego, that fragile mask that believed it had control over life. When the mask falls, you are forced to look at the raw truth of your existence. Your insecurities, your contradictions, your hidden desires. It's painful to see how deeply you have betrayed your own essence in order to belong. Yet this pain is the doorway to freedom. The collapse brings you face to face with what you have been avoiding all along yourself. In those moments of despair, when nothing outside of you makes sense, something profound begins to stir within. The silence that follows destruction is not emptiness, it is potential. For the first time, you start to listen. You hear the faint voice of your deeper self, the one that has been buried beneath noise and distraction. It doesn't speak in words, but in intuition, in sudden clarity, in the quiet knowing that what has fallen was never truly yours to begin with. You start to see that every loss was a removal of what no longer served your growth. Every ending was a doorway disguised as failure. This inner collapse demands courage, because it forces you to walk away from the false security of who you thought you were. The mind resists, the heart aches, and yet something beyond both urges you forward. The darkness that surrounds you is not there to destroy. It is there to forge. Every emotion that arises during this collapse, fear, grief, anger, confusion, is part of the purification process. They are not enemies but messengers, guiding you toward the fragments of yourself that need integration. If you allow the process to unfold, without rushing to rebuild prematurely, you begin to notice subtle shifts. You stop chasing validation. You stop performing. You start breathing again, deeply and without reason. Rebuilding does not begin with action. It begins with surrender. You allow the old to die so that the real can live. The collapse strips you bare so that you can finally meet yourself beyond identity, beyond narrative. You realize that losing everything you thought you were is not the end. It is the beginning of truth. The self that emerges from this quiet ruin is not fragile but grounded, not desperate but free. Through the destruction of illusion, life gives you back what was always yours: your wholeness, your clarity, your untamed spirit. And though you may not see it yet, every fall is the universe's way of rebuilding you into the person you were meant to become. The descent into the inner world begins when the external one no longer satisfies the hunger of the soul. You start to realize that no matter how much you achieve, acquire, or prove, something within remains unsettled. The world teaches you to seek fulfillment outside, through success, validation, love, or recognition. But there comes a moment when the noise fades and a strange emptiness takes its place. That silence is the call of your inner world, an invitation to turn inward and confront what you have long ignored. This descent is not glamorous, it is raw and often terrifying. It demands that you leave behind the surface of things and journey into the depths of your own psyche, where your fears, memories, and forgotten truths dwell. To descend inward is to walk into darkness without a map. The mind resists because it cannot control what lies beyond logic. You feel lost, anxious, and alone because everything familiar begins to dissolve. Yet this disorientation is necessary. It is the unraveling of false certainty. You begin to see how much of your life has been lived through the lens of avoidance, how you've built habits, identities, and distractions to escape from your own feelings. The descent strips away those defenses one by one. It reveals the chaos beneath the order, the pain beneath the smile, the vulnerability beneath the strength. You discover that the inner world is not gentle at first. It mirrors the parts of you that you have denied for years. This journey inward often begins with suffering. Pain acts as the door to the unconscious. It breaks open the walls of your false stability and forces you to face what you buried long ago. Childhood wounds, unhealed grief, unresolved guilt, unexpressed anger. Each fragment calls out for acknowledgement. The deeper you go, the more you realize that healing does not come from running away from darkness, but from allowing yourself to feel it fully. You start to see that the emotions you labeled as bad were never meant to be rejected. They were signals guiding you back to wholeness. Every tear, every ache, every silence holds wisdom, if only you stop resisting it. The inner world operates by different laws than the outer one. There is no time, no linear progress, no applause. Growth here happens in stillness. It requires patience and honesty. The descent teaches you humility, for it exposes how little you truly know about yourself. The persona, the face you show to the world, begins to crack, and underneath it, you meet your true self not as an idea, but as an experience. You may encounter your shadow, that hidden part of you that holds everything you've rejected. Envy, rage, shame, desire, power. It can be unsettling to see it, but in truth, it holds the energy you need to become whole. By acknowledging it instead of suppressing it, you reclaim lost parts of your soul. The descent also confronts you with paradox. You discover that the light and dark within you are not enemies but partners. The pain you once hated becomes a teacher. The fear you tried to silence becomes a guardian. You begin to understand that the soul's growth is not about eliminating darkness, but integrating it. This is where true transformation happens, not in denying your depth but in embracing it. The inner world reshapes you quietly, molding your perception, your values, and your understanding of life itself. As you move deeper into this inward journey, you start to detach from external validation. The opinions of others lose their grip on your worth. You stop performing for the world and begin listening to the whispers of your own being. You notice how silence heals, how solitude strengthens, and how reflection reveals truths that action never could. The descent teaches you to surrender control, to trust the unseen, to find peace in uncertainty. You no longer chase clarity, you become it. Though this inner passage feels lonely, it is filled with guidance. Symbols, dreams, and intuitions appear like lanterns in the dark. They speak a language beyond words, reminding you that the wisdom you seek has always been within you. The descent is not an escape from reality, but a return to it. When you finally allow yourself to face your depths, you emerge not with more answers, but with understanding. You learn that the descent was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to reveal you. Confronting the shadow is the most demanding act of self-awareness, for it requires you to face the parts of yourself you would rather pretend do not exist. Every human being carries within a hidden realm the reservoir of impulses, fears, and emotions that society, upbringing, and personal guilt have pushed into the dark. This is the shadow, and though it remains unseen, it shapes your choices, relationships, and perceptions more than the conscious mind ever could. To confront it means to stop running from yourself, to turn toward the internal darkness that whispers through your insecurities and reactions, and to meet it without judgment. Most people spend their lives avoiding this encounter, projecting their own unwanted qualities onto others. They condemn what they cannot accept within, and in doing so, they live divided, half alive. To face the shadow, you must first accept that it exists. Your conscious self-image resists this truth fiercely. It clings to the idea of being good, rational, and in control, but the ego's purity is an illusion built on denial. The anger you suppress, the jealousy you disown, the desires you hide, and the fear you disguise as confidence, these do not disappear simply because you ignore them. They collect strength in silence, influencing your behavior in subtle, unconscious ways. You see it when you react disproportionately to minor things, when you judge others harshly for qualities that secretly belong to you, or when you repeat painful patterns without understanding why. The shadow is not evil, it is merely unacknowledged power. What you repress becomes what controls you. The process of confronting this inner darkness is not an act of violence but of courage. It begins in moments of deep honesty, when you stop blaming the world and look within. The shadow reveals itself through discomfort. When you feel jealousy, instead of denying it, you ask what it says about your unfulfilled potential. When you feel rage, you explore what boundary or truth you have been afraid to defend. Every emotion that arises is a messenger from the unseen self, guiding you toward wholeness. The task is to listen, not suppress. Through this listening, you begin to see that what you call flaws are often distorted expressions of strength. Anger hiding as repressed passion, envy concealing forgotten ambition, fear guarding unacknowledged wisdom. The danger of ignoring the shadow is that it turns destructive. Whatever is denied seeks expression through projection. You begin to see the darkness in others and condemn it, unaware that it mirrors your own. Conflicts in relationships often arise not from genuine differences, but from the collision of unrecognized shadows. You see the arrogance, manipulation, or selfishness in someone else because a part of you carries it too. This projection keeps you blind to your own truth. The world then becomes a reflection of your inner division, and you spend your life fighting enemies that exist only because you refuse to meet them within yourself. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim your power. It is to gather the pieces of yourself that you once cast away and bring them home. Integration does not mean indulgence. It means acknowledgement. You do not act upon every dark impulse, but you no longer deny its presence. You learn to hold your darkness with awareness, to understand its origin, and to use its energy consciously. The moment you can look at your shadow without disgust, without fear, something miraculous happens. It begins to transform. What once felt like poison becomes potential. You realize that your shadow carries not only your wounds but also your gifts. Creativity, intuition, depth, and compassion often arise from the very aspects of yourself you once rejected. The journey of confronting the shadow changes your relationship with the world. You become less reactive, more understanding, less judgmental. You see others not as threats or projections but as mirrors, reflecting the same complexity that lives within you. Compassion deepens, for you recognize the shared struggle of being human. To balance light and dark, to seek meaning amid contradiction. You stop striving for perfection and instead aim for authenticity. In embracing the shadow, you no longer chase an ideal self. You embody a whole one. This confrontation is not a one-time event, but a lifelong dialogue. Each stage of growth uncovers new layers of shadow waiting to be seen. But with every meeting, your awareness expands, your inner balance strengthens, and your capacity for truth widens. Through this process, the energy once spent on repression becomes fuel for creation, wisdom, and peace. You learn that wholeness is not found in purity, but in integration. By facing what you fear within, you reclaim what you truly are, a being vast enough to hold both darkness and light in harmony. The alchemy of suffering begins in the moment you stop running from pain and start to see it as a teacher rather than an enemy. Every human life encounters suffering, loss, rejection, disappointment, betrayal, failure, and each time the instinct is to escape, to numb, to find quick relief. Yet what you try to avoid most intensely is often what holds the greatest potential for your transformation. Pain is not chaos, it is a message. It dismantles illusions, exposes attachments, and burns away everything false. It forces you to see where you have built your identity on fragile ground. The process is alchemical, because it takes something seemingly destructive and turns it into gold. The gold of self, understanding, resilience, and depth. But this transformation can only happen through participation, not avoidance. When you experience deep suffering, the first response is resistance. You want to explain it, justify it, or escape it through distraction. But suffering loses its meaning when you turn away from it. Transformation begins when you allow yourself to sit in the fire without demanding immediate answers. Pain holds a strange intelligence. It knows exactly where to press to reveal the places within you that need healing. It draws attention to your inner fractures, your dependency on external approval, your fear of being alone, your attachment to outcomes. Every heartbreak, every loss is a mirror reflecting something about your relationship with yourself. If you are willing to look, suffering becomes a sacred dialogue rather than a punishment. The alchemy begins the moment awareness enters. Pain that is unconscious breeds despair. Pain that is observed begins to transform. You start to notice that suffering is not a single, solid thing but a layered experience. Beneath anger lies fear, beneath fear lies sadness, and beneath sadness often lies love. Love that was unexpressed, misunderstood, or unfulfilled. When you explore these layers instead of resisting them, you release trapped energy. That energy becomes the raw material for growth. The same fire that once consumed you becomes the fire that refines you. Through this process, your suffering turns from chaos into wisdom. True transformation through pain requires surrender, not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of openness. The willingness to let life break you open, so that something greater can enter. You stop asking, "Why me?" and begin asking, "What is this teaching me?" Slowly, you learn to trust the deeper intelligence behind your experiences. You start to see that what breaks your heart is also what expands it. The cracks that pain creates in your being become spaces through which understanding, empathy, and humility flow. You begin to recognize the paradox that pain both wounds and awakens. It humbles the ego, softens the heart, and sharpens perception. It strips you of pretense and reveals the simple truth of what it means to be human. The alchemy of suffering is not a linear process. There are days when you feel reborn and others when the same pain returns, deeper and sharper, but each return carries new insight. The more you face suffering consciously, the less control it has over you. You realize that the purpose of pain was never to destroy you, but to dissolve what was never real. The identities, attachments, and masks that crumble under suffering were never the essence of who you are. Through the burning away of illusions, your soul becomes visible. You discover a strength that does not depend on circumstance and a peace that does not rely on control. Pain also reveals your shared humanity. When you suffer consciously, you begin to feel compassion for others in their suffering. You understand that every person carries invisible battles, that cruelty often hides fear, and that indifference often masks pain. This awareness makes you softer without making you weak. You stop seeing suffering as something to be ashamed of and begin to see it as the thread that connects all living beings. Out of your own wounds grows the capacity to heal others, not through advice or pity, but through presence and understanding. In time, you begin to thank the experiences that once broke you. You recognize that they brought depth to your existence, that they forced you to shed layers of illusion and come closer to truth. The alchemy of suffering transforms your relationship with life itself. You stop chasing constant comfort and instead seek meaning. You learn that every emotion, joy, sorrow, fear, is part of the same current guiding you toward wholeness. Through suffering, the soul learns endurance, wisdom, and grace. The fire that once seemed to consume you becomes the same fire that illuminates your path. The union of opposites is the central mystery of human transformation. Every person lives within a web of contradictions, love and fear, strength and weakness, light and shadow, peace and chaos. We are taught to choose one side, to identify with the positive and suppress the negative, to pursue perfection while denying imperfection. Yet, this division creates an internal war that never ends. The more you cling to one extreme, the more power the other gains in the dark. The truth is that the soul was never meant to be split. Holiness